Imagine waking up to find your crypto exchange account frozen, not because of a court order, but because a government algorithm flagged your wallet address as suspicious. It sounds like a dystopian central bank digital currency nightmare. But on the 9th of March, the US Treasury officially asked Congress for the legal authority to do exactly that. They are requesting a statutory safe harbor to freeze digital assets without a warrant, targeting a stablecoin market that currently holds over $262 billion in systemic value. The mainstream media is applauding this as a necessary crackdown on cartel money laundering. But buried inside their 32-page legislative request is the architecture for the most expansive financial surveillance net since 2001. My name is Lewis, and you're watching the Coin Bureau. So, is this just a necessary tool to fight illicit stablecoin flows? Are we staring down the barrel of a Patriot Act 2.0 for Web3? Or is this the final piece of compliance plumbing Wall Street needs to control decentralized finance? That is exactly what we're going to cover today. First things first, though, let's look at the catalyst that has privacy advocates sounding the alarm. On the 9th of March 2026, the US Treasury published a highly anticipated 32-page report detailing the evolving landscape of crypto-related crime. This document was mandated under Section 9 of the Genius Act, the landmark stablecoin legislation that President Trump signed into law back in July of 2025. Now, if you read the mainstream financial press right now, the headlines are entirely focused on one terrifying narrative. They will cite reports from blockchain analytics firms like Chainalysis showing that Chinese language organized crime networks moved an estimated $16.1 billion through crypto in 2025. They will point to original Treasury data revealing that North Korean cybercriminals stole at least $2.8 billion in digital assets over the last 2 years. And they will highlight the $1.5 billion Bybit hack as proof that the current regulatory perimeter is failing. The Treasury's argument is that current law enforcement mechanisms are simply too slow to stop these cross-border transfers. By the time investigators secure a subpoena, the stolen funds have already been pushed through a mixer, swapped into stablecoins, and bridged across multiple networks. To the average retail investor reading the news, this looks like a standard, entirely justified anti-money laundering initiative. Nobody wants to see North Korea funding its weapons programs with stolen Bitcoin. But if you actually read the fine print of the legislative recommendations, a much darker reality emerges. Because the Treasury is not just asking for better enforcement of existing laws, they are asking Congress to fundamentally rewrite the rules of financial privacy in the United States. Let's take a closer look at the exact figures the Treasury is using to justify this power grab. According to TRM Labs, illicit entities received approximately $141 billion in stablecoins in 2025. That sounds like an astronomical figure, and it is. But it represents less than 1.2% of the roughly $4 trillion in total stablecoin activity we saw last year. The overwhelming majority of stablecoin volume is entirely lawful, driven by users seeking refuge from inflation or executing legitimate cross-border payments. Yet, the Treasury's proposed solution treats the entire ecosystem as a potential threat vector. And that brings us to the specific legal mechanisms that they are demanding. But here is where the story turns. Because the real threat isn't the crackdown on cartels, it is the legal precedent being requested. The Treasury is urging Congress to enact a digital asset-specific hold law. Put simply, this would give financial institutions and crypto exchanges a legal safe harbor to temporarily freeze your assets without a formal warrant. Now, to understand why this is so revolutionary, you have to understand how the current Bank Secrecy Act actually works. And, well, here's how it works. Under current law, if a bank detects suspicious activity, they're required to file a Suspicious Activity Report, or SAR, with FinCEN. But crucially, they're not clearly authorized to freeze your funds without a court order, sanctions authority, or risking massive civil liability. The SAR regime is a disclosure mechanism, not a freeze mechanism. If an exchange freezes your account today and they are wrong, well, you can sue them. The proposed hold law completely removes that liability. It grants exchanges statutory immunity to act as a private enforcement arm of the federal government. If their internal AI monitoring software flags your transaction as high risk, well, they could lock your account immediately. No judge, no subpoena, and no due process required. And this creates a terrifying legal paradox. Public affairs attorney Andrew Rosso recently pointed out a massive structural flaw in this proposal. Under existing SAR rules, platforms are legally prohibited from informing users that they are under investigation. This is known as the tipping off restriction. So, if an exchange freezes your assets under this new hold law, well, they cannot legally tell you why. You will wake up, find your account locked, and be met with a generic customer service wall of silence. You will know that you are frozen, but you won't know why, and you won't have a court order to challenge. We have already seen exactly what this looks like in practice. Cast your mind back to February of 2022 during the Canadian trucker convoy protests. The Canadian government invoked the Emergencies Act to freeze bank accounts and cryptocurrency wallets tied to the protesters. They bypassed the courts and ordered regulated financial firms to cease facilitating transactions for dozens of targeted addresses. A Canadian federal court later ruled that this use of emergency powers was completely unconstitutional. But the U.S. Treasury is now asking Congress to make the exact same freeze power a permanent, everyday feature of the American financial system. They don't want to declare a national emergency. They just want a safe harbor. And speaking of staying ahead of these regulatory shocks before they wipe out your portfolio, this is exactly why you need the Coin Bureau Telegram channel in your life. That is where we share the latest breaking news, provide deep dive alpha, and give you the most important market updates, all pinged directly to your device so that you don't miss a thing. Whether it's a hidden clause in a Treasury report or massive on-chain whale movements, our members see it first. So sign up today using the link down below or by scanning the QR code on the screen. Now, back to the Treasury report. Because as chilling as the hold law is for centralized exchanges, it is only half of the government's plan. The Treasury knows that if they squeeze centralized exchanges too hard, users will simply migrate to decentralized finance. And the data shows that this migration is already happening. According to CoinGecko, decentralized exchanges saw their spot trading market volume share double from 6.9% in early 2024 to nearly 14% in 2026. Perpetual DEX volume surged an astonishing 176% last year alone. So, to capture this decentralized volume, the Treasury has proposed what might be the most aggressive expansion of financial surveillance in modern U.S. history. They are proposing an expansion to Section 311 of the USA Patriot Act. Now, this is where things get a bit technical, so listen carefully. Historically, Section 311 grants the Treasury Secretary the authority to designate foreign jurisdictions or foreign banks as a primary money laundering concern. If a foreign bank is designated under the fifth special measure, U.S. institutions are prohibited from maintaining correspondent accounts with them. It is effectively a death sentence that cuts the target off from the U.S. dollar system. But there is a fundamental constraint built into the current law. Section 311 only targets foreign entities through traditional correspondent banking relationships. The Treasury wants to blow that wall wide open. They are asking Congress to create a sixth special measure. This new special measure would authorize the Treasury to prohibit or impose strict conditions on specific digital asset transmittals that have absolutely no connection to a correspondent bank. Let's be precise about what is actually happening here. This would allow the Treasury to designate specific smart contract addresses, decentralized lending protocols, or cross-chain bridges as primary money laundering concerns. It completely bypasses the traditional judicial process. We saw a preview of this in August of 2022 when the Office of Foreign Assets Control sanctioned the Tornado Cash smart contracts. That was the first time the government tried to sanction open source code rather than a person or a corporate entity. But in November 2024, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals struck that down. The court ruled that immutable smart contracts cannot be owned or controlled, so they do not meet the legal definition of sanctionable property. The government lost. OFAC was forced to officially lift the sanctions on Tornado Cash in March of 2025. But the Treasury did not give up. They simply changed their strategy. Because the courts told them that they lacked the statutory authority to sanction smart contracts, they're now going directly to Congress to get that exact authority written into the Patriot Act. Alex Thorne, the head of firm-wide research at Galaxy Digital, warned about this exact mechanism earlier this year. He stated that if these powers become law, they would represent the single largest expansion of financial surveillance authorities since the Patriot Act was originally passed in 2001. This isn't just a regulatory tweak, it is a legislative kill switch for permissionless finance. Now, to understand why this is so dangerous, you need to look at how this integrates with Wall Street's massive tokenization push. Because the mainstream narrative will tell you that traditional finance is finally embracing crypto. Larry Fink and BlackRock are tokenizing billions of dollars in US Treasuries. The tokenized real-world asset market has exploded past $36 billion. But what Wall Street is quietly building is not a bridge to decentralized finance. It is a compliance dragnet designed to absorb crypto into the traditional financial surveillance state. And the technical plumbing for this is already fully operational. We recently covered how institutions are building permissioned DeFi using a specific smart contract standard called ERC 3643. Unlike a standard ERC20 token, which is permissionless by default, the ERC 3643 standard requires every single wallet to pass KYC and AML verification before it could send or receive any token. It uses an on-chain identity registry called On-Chain ID to map every crypto wallet to a verified real-world identity. But here is the absolute kicker. That standard already has wallet-level freezing and forced transfer capabilities built directly into the smart contracts. It is a mandatory requirement of the protocol. The administrator of the token can freeze your wallet, pause your transfers, or forcefully claw back your assets at any time. Tokeny, the company behind this standard, now powers over $32 billion in tokenized assets. Even the DTCC, the largest post-trade financial infrastructure provider on the planet, has joined the ERC 3643 Association. This is becoming the default compliance layer for global capital markets. And we are already seeing this architecture bleed into decentralized exchanges. In February 2026, BlackRock listed its $2.4 billion BUIDL fund on Uniswap. Retail investors cheered, thinking Wall Street was finally providing liquidity to DeFi. But the contract rejects you automatically before a single token moves unless your wallet has been explicitly whitelisted by Securitize, BlackRock's registered transfer agent. Full stop. They're renting permissionless infrastructure to run a completely permissioned, gated financial product. Now, connect the dots between Wall Street's tokenization standard and the Treasury's proposed hold law. If Congress grants this hold law, exchanges and token issuers will be legally shielded from civil liability when they use those ERC 3643 freeze functions. It effectively turns centralized exchanges and stablecoin issuers into deputized arms of the federal government. If an algorithm flags your account, the exchange invokes the safe harbor, freezes your custodial account, and simultaneously triggers the smart contract freeze function on your on-chain assets. And if you think the base layer of Ethereum is immune to this pressure, well, history says otherwise. In late 2022, following the initial Tornado Cash sanctions, the percentage of OFAC-compliant blocks on the Ethereum network peaked at roughly 80%. 8 out of 10 blocks were actively censoring transactions to comply with US Treasury sanctions. The compliance layer inevitably bleeds into the base layer. The censorship didn't require a protocol upgrade. It only required a handful of private relay operators to make a legal decision about which transactions they would process. If the Treasury gets the power to designate DeFi protocols under the Patriot Act, that base layer censorship won't just be voluntary. It will be a federal mandate. So, what's the verdict? Well, let's be blunt. The Treasury's 32-page report is not just a warning. It is a highly coordinated legislative roadmap. While the stated goal of stopping $2.8 billion in North Korean cyber theft is entirely valid, the mechanism they are requesting fundamentally breaks the premise of permissionless finance. By asking for the power to freeze assets without a warrant, and by expanding the Patriot Act to cover DeFi protocols, the government is building the ultimate compliance dragnet. And the market is already pricing this dystopian reality in. While Bitcoin and Ethereum have struggled to reclaim their all-time highs, privacy coins are seeing a massive resurgence. Monero has surged over 63% in the past year, recently hitting a peak of nearly $800 in January. That is a measurable, quantifiable privacy premium. Capital is actively fleeing transparent blockchains in search of censorship resistance. The institutional adoption of crypto was always going to come with a regulatory cost. We traded the cypherpunk ethos for spot ETFs and Wall Street liquidity. But this proposal proves that the endgame isn't just regulation, it is absolute control. The question isn't whether Wall Street and the Treasury will try to build this surveillance architecture. The data proves that they already are. The question is, will the crypto community recognize the trap before the doors lock from the outside? But what do you think? Is a statutory hold law a necessary evil to legitimize the crypto industry and stop illicit finance? Or is it a catastrophic violation of our fundamental financial privacy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to understand exactly how Wall Street is building KYC directly into smart contracts, well, you could check out our video on that right over here. And if you want to dive deeper into how macroeconomic forces are reshaping the digital gold narrative, well, you could check that video out right over here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. This is Lewis signing off.